very first episode of The Book People, where I interview people whose lives and careers revolve around books. I'm your host Aishwarya, and today we are going to be talking about commissioning. Commissioning is something that has always excited me because it was the first thing that got me interested in publishing. You know, the power that editors hold when they can look at an idea or look at a book proposal and say, you know what, this will make a great book. Or when they can say that this book will be a bestseller. And that's something I have always wanted to do myself. And it's also so glamorous, right? Imagine going to book tours and taking celeb authors out for lunches and going to literary festivals. So today I have with me Sayantan Ghosh. He's an editor who has spent the last 7 years creating the most interesting and diverse list, from Prayag Akbar's Leila to Priya Sahgal's The Contenders. He has commissioned and published books that span every genre in fiction and non-fiction. So today he really breaks down the publishing process and he offers some very sensible advice for people who want to get published and for people who are trying to break into the industry. So let's tune in. Hi Sayantan, welcome to The Book People.
Hi Aishwarya. Thank you for having me here.
So Sayantan, I really want to know, is commissioning really as glamorous as it seems? You know, what exactly does it include?
A lot really relies upon the sensibilities and judgments of a commissioning editor, uh, because no matter how many submissions we receive, which is tons, mm, every day there are people who are sending in manuscripts, um, both agents as well as unsolicited. The new phenomenon is I get manuscripts on Twitter now.
You
Like
do?
yes, on my other inbox, I have full manuscripts waiting there. So I understand also that there is a need and a desire to write because over the past perhaps a decade, Indian writing in English has become sort of glamorous thanks to the literary festivals and media coverage and everything else.
Yeah.
Um, but the job itself isn't glamorous per se. It's as dry as it gets. You sit on a desk, you open a manuscript, you have no idea. Most of the times, you have no idea who the person behind the document is,
Yeah.
and you start reading, and you have to uh, rely entirely upon your own instincts to decide whether or not to take that manuscript forward. Of course, there are other decisions that the management takes, that the company takes. Every publishing house works with a certain kind of a short-term and a long-term goal.
Yeah.
So depending upon the publishing plan, a lot changes. The kind of books that a publishing house wants to do, especially at Simon and Schuster, because we have such a small list. We publish not more than 20 books a year. Last year, not even that, of course. Uh, so the job to select the right titles becomes even harder. So I get it when people say that why are a few people the gatekeepers of this industry, but I don't know what the solution is. What I try to do is read as much as possible everything that comes my way, unless it sounds absolutely ridiculous, which is also the case sometimes. I do read the manuscript and then discuss it with the other editors in our publishing house, and you know or even with friends sometimes, just to get an idea of what they think of the idea. Because sometimes what happens after working in publishing for all these years, you tend to look at manuscripts a certain way. You're not a general reader anymore, unfortunately, which is a problem I
Yeah.
face when I'm reading for pleasure as well. Because when I'm reading for pleasure, I'm looking for things in it which I shouldn't be. I should just enjoy a book, which becomes harder. So yeah, glamorous perhaps from the outside, but it's just sitting at a desk and reading.
Okay, I'm so amused by your answer because you just answered like 5 questions in one go that I was gonna ask next. And I was sort of ticking them off in my mind because I'm like, oh, this question, okay, this
I'm
question done.
sorry.
What do I
I'm
ask now?
sorry.
But no, I think it's great because I do know that, there's a lot of this conversation about gatekeeping, which is definitely true.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I want to know, or the thing that I feel like people don't know much about, is sort of what
Mhm.
even commissioning is. What is exactly
Mhm.
the process from,
Yeah.
say, when you get a manuscript in your inbox
Yeah.
or Twitter to sort of reading it to that final step where you sign an author in,
Uh,
and when the author sort of signs the contract. Like, how does that work?
uh,
Mhm.
it really is, there is no one answer to this question, to be honest, because there are multiple layers to it. Sometimes it's the agent sending us a manuscript. uh, More often than not, it's an agent we have worked with in the past and we have a working experience with. So we'll pick up the phone, or we'll just reply to that email and ask what the deal is. There's a formal email which comes in, and then we get
Yeah.
a hang of what the manuscript is trying to talk about, because sometimes it's not possible to read the entire manuscript. Mm, because, like I said, there are tons, and it's impossible for one person to read all that comes their way. But I try to read as many as possible. So that's one way of taking it forward. If I like the manuscript, I discuss it with the team, and then, if what we do here at least is that we, after having taken an editorial decision that this manuscript is fit for our publishing house, or fit for the kind of list that we're trying to build for the next year, we discuss it with the sales and marketing team, of course, that how do we publicize a book like this, because that's the unfortunate thing is that's so important now. I don't know if
Yeah.
people will tell you this, but at every publishing meeting or editorial meeting or whatever, when a new manuscript comes in, one of the questions that's raised by marketing is, how many Twitter followers do they have? What's their Instagram
Right.
following? Because without that, a publishing house can push a book to a certain extent. But having said that, a publishing house has multiple titles they're pushing at the same time, whereas an author will only push their own book, which is
Yeah.
extremely important now, because especially at an age of social media where everybody is a star, right? I mean, people who are, you can be a cooking food at home and you can have thousands of followers on your account, and you can be a sort of celebrity that way.
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, anyone can become an influencer, right? So I
Absolutely,
can,
absolutely.
yeah, so I can see why, sort of that
Yeah,
author credibility, or even like
yeah.
sort of their social media platform becomes important. You
Yeah,
also end up
yeah,
looking at sort of trends, or what
yeah,
is doing
yeah,
really well,
yeah.
in the market currently, sort of what books have become bestsellers, or what books
Absolutely,
have won
absolutely.
awards. Like, are those also things that you consider before deciding
Absolutely,
which
of
books
course,
to?
of course. I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. One is you do some books, uh, knowing that perhaps they won't do the kind of numbers that you would want a book to do, but it's an important
Right.
book that should be out there. It's an important book that will not only add prestige to your list, perhaps earn you an award nomination. Awards are a little secondary, but at least earn good reviews from the reviewers and the critics, and add some value to your list. And some books you have to, of course, do which perhaps won't get the best of reviews. Perhaps the critics are not going to love it as much, but they'll do you the numbers, and you have to maintain a balance, because otherwise, all said and done, there's no romanticizing it. It's a business we are running.
Yeah.
Not even we. It's a business these corporates are running. We're just we're just some
Just
cogs in that wheel.
yeah, you're just cogs in the wheel. But
Yeah,
actually, that is a question that I had about maintaining that balance.
yeah,
Because, like you said, it's about maintaining the balance between sort of books that will be successful versus books
yeah.
that might not be that successful. But it could also be the balance of, say, making sure you're publishing books across different genres, like a balance of
Of
fiction
course.
books and non-fiction
Yes.
books, or
Yes.
new authors and established authors. So
Yes.
how do you, as an editor, sort of keep that balance for yourself? Like, how do you build your list?
Uh, Over the past few years, what the whole industry has noticed is that nonfiction sells much better, and a lot more many writers have come out with their with ideas, with more, for the lack of a better word, more innovative ideas of nonfiction than with
Right.
fiction. The inventiveness with fiction, we see gets limited sometimes, because what happens with fiction is, because fiction has some amount of fame associated with it, instant fame. So what happens is, when the moment one book becomes a success, there are a bunch of others who are writing the same book in the same
Yeah.
space, just trying to
Definitely, it
rehash.
becomes like a formula, right?
It
I
does.
think if it worked
which
once, then it'll work over and
which
over
doesn't
again.
work, which
Yeah.
literally never works. I mean,
Yeah.
we Simon and Schuster India launched in 2017 with a book called Leila by Prayag Akbar, which later
Yes.
on became a Netflix show. Now that book became very successful because it was new when it came out. You will be amazed to hear the number of similar manuscripts I've received since then. And the irony is that you send it to the same publishing house who have published it already. So you think that they have done it once, so they'll do it again. But the point is, nobody wants to read the same book again. You go to a bookstore, you talk to the industry people, and they say fiction is dying. It's not the case. Fiction is very much alive. So I, at least in my role, try to maintain a healthy balance. Uh, I can't publish as many literary fiction titles in a year that I would like to, because I like reading them.
Yeah.
But if I publish two solid fiction titles, I'll ensure that I'll uh, fight for a literary fiction title and it's a fight. So sometimes you win the fight, sometimes you lose the fight. I've lost books I regretted. I've been able to acquire books that I've prized.
No, I definitely understand because I did a publishing program in Canada, and sort of when I was studying that, one of the things that they kept drilling into us is that if and when you do work as an editor at a publishing house, you will
Yeah,
like sales will be sort of the bane of your existence because you have to keep convincing them, right? It's sort of
you
that
do.
back and forth, and it's sort you
Yeah,
have to keep justifying why you want to publish certain books and
absolutely.
why these books would work, and
Yeah.
sort of that back and forth is, I mean, super helpful for the publishing house, but can be very frustrating as an editor because you just want to publish sort of the books that you love, right?
I also think it's essential because as an editor, you are also limited by your experiences. You're
Yes.
mostly working indoors. You're working with publishers. You're working with authors. You're working with other freelancers, proofreaders, designers. This is a group of people you usually work with. You're not sitting with the retailer and the distributor. I mean, a couple of
Yes.
bookstores that I visit, I try to sit with them, have a chat with them. But it's impossible for me to visit bookstores all across the country, right? But these guys are doing that, uh, and they know what's actually happening on the ground. It's also trust building, right? Like
Yeah.
we build trust with an author, we build trust with an agent. When a particular agent sends me a manuscript, I know they're not going to send me something that I'll dislike, because there is a trust that builds over a period of time. Of course, not all the manuscripts that come in I'll be able to sign
Mhm.
up, but similarly, a trust building exercise has to be also built with done with the sales guys and the marketing team as well, because it's you cannot function independently. It's not an independent role, unlike a writer's, say, where they can just sit at a desk and type. An
Yeah.
editor can't do that. You have to get all the information that's there. Sometimes you have to also understand where they're coming from and take your call accordingly. Sometimes I have let go of manuscripts. Authors have been dying to work with, but somehow are not a perfect fit for our list, because our sales guys perhaps have not been as convinced as perhaps someone else would be.
So, from what you're saying, it sounds like so much of your role is, like you said, building relationships
Yeah,
and managing relationships with different people,
yeah,
and obviously
it
editing.
is.
So, what does a work day for you look like, or, a work week for you look like in terms of balancing these different roles that you're playing?
Hmm. Hmm. So the general work day would be, uh, if I'm going to office, most of the time is spent there. Most of the days that I would be going to office would be spent in meetings with the team. Sometimes authors would drop in, sometimes an agent would drop in. Uh, Team meetings would keep happening. There's a marketing meeting, there's a sales meeting, there are a bunch of them. Otherwise, in a week, you read, you try to meet authors who you are interested in. You try to talk to as many people as possible. It's really an open field, because sometimes a book is born out of nothing, just out of conversations. Um, a book that I just published is a book it's the biography of Guru Dutt, the filmmaker.
Mhm.
Yasir Usman, who's a prolific Bollywood biographer, he wrote it. Uh, that Yasir and I have been talking about a book for years. And he was writing for other publishers at the same time, other books, and I have been reading them, absolutely admiring them and enjoying them. Uh, but there was no idea where we both met at the same place. Uh,
Right.
we kept speaking. It wasn't that every time we met or spoke, it was with the intention of coming up with an idea, but we kept the thought in our head that perhaps something would eventually come out of it. one day I'm at his house, we are having a drink and we are listening to music, and and Guru Dutt's songs come up, and then we start discussing, and that's how the idea was born. That can we do something about it? This was 2.5 years ago, but that's just how an idea is born. Sometimes, of course, a hell lot of work goes into producing that material, which of course in this case Yasser and other authors do, and I try to help them as much as possible. Sometimes the author would come up to you with an idea, and then you try building a narrative around it. Sometimes it's just a one-line idea, but you try and build a narrative around it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a multi-layered process, really. But a general work day, you read as much as possible, you talk to as many people as possible, and not just, when I say as many people, I don't just mean people who are published authors. You look out for people who have ideas.
But like so much of this is sort of just maintaining friendships, with
Absolutely.
interesting
Absolutely.
people, just forming
Absolutely.
connections with people, and not even sort of within the industry, just literally just
Absolutely.
interesting people, just keeping a
Absolutely.
lookout for people who are saying interesting things or doing interesting things, and maybe someday you will do something with them. And
anybody with an idea.
Anyone with an idea, exactly. And I was just thinking about how everyone sort of says that editors are introverts and who are always reading and who are always sort of working in these solitary sort of individual spaces, right? And everything that you're doing is basically talking to people.
It actually goes against my nature also, because I'm very I have a distaste for social gatherings. So but when it comes to work, I don't mind it. Personally, my friends keep complaining because it's not a balance I can maintain. I like spending. I mean, some of that cliche, it's possibly true. I like this job because I get to do it sitting at my home, and I don't need to, go out too much. But interactions around building books, I always enjoy. So that's, thankfully, that works out.
Because you're a commissioning editor, I'm thinking about sort of book launches and literary festivals and events and all of these things that you're doing. I mean, now it's the pandemic, so this is all sort of
but that's a part of the work that I do. I know that in order to be, are we always signing up new authors at a literary festival? No. But is it important to be there? Yes. Is it important to be there for your own authors who are speaking there? Yes. Are you going to contribute to that in any way? No. They know what they're going to talk about. You don't need to tell them anything. They know, you possibly don't have any idea what they're going to talk about. But just the fact that you're on their team and you're sitting on the front row cheering for them, or sitting and listening to them, a familiar face in the audience always helps. Even with the biggest of authors, I've seen that. I don't know what it is, but it's some sense of comfort. And of course, there is a comfort from the editors and as well, that I was able to be there for my author when they were doing something important. It's also important to be out there, to, like I said, to be able to speak to a bunch of people who have ideas.
And I think it's also the difference between any sort of public gathering versus a public gathering where you know what people are going to talk about. Like, it's going to be about books. There's sort of some amount of structure or script involved around what kind of conversations you would even have, which I think
absolutely nobody's going to ask me why I'm not married yet.
True.
That's a relief, right?
That's true. Yes. I understand that. So how did you get into publishing in the first place? How did you decide to become an editor?
I didn't have any plans to become an editor. I don't have a publishing or an English degree as well. I studied economics, which became a problem. I'll just keep it short, which became a huge problem for me to enter the industry. I hope things have changed a little bit now. When I meet young people now who are trying to get in and they don't have an English degree, I try to encourage them, because it's important, but it's not the only important thing. I mean, as long as you have an understanding of the language, it's fine. A degree often, more often than not, doesn't really teach you much in India. So, so I'm going to.
As far as I have seen recently, I think a lot of people who now enter publishing don't necessarily have an English degree. They'll have like history or political science, sort of some degree around,
which is how it should be. Which is how it should be. I mean, I was not even from the arts. I was from economics, but it's important. I have benefited so much from that. I can't tell you, because there are so many books that we do on policies and other things where other editors have zero understanding sometimes. And I do get what they're trying to say because I've studied it. So it's
Yeah.
important to have the right mix. But when I was trying to get in, this was end of 2012, 2013, early 2013 is when I moved to Delhi and joined publishing. But when I tried applying to, I applied to a bunch of places. I mean, it's the funniest story because I have no idea how to go ahead. It was as idiotic as Googling the top 10 publishing houses in India and the worst 10 publishing houses in India. And there were a bunch of names which came. And I applied to as many as possible. I wrote a letter to as many as possible saying that, this is where I'm coming from. Why I wanted to join publishing, it was a desire, because reading has been a constant habit. Whatever I was doing before this, I was not enjoying much, which had nothing to do with publishing. Simple things as proofreading marks. I had no understanding. I had no idea what they were. But, I would go, one thing I have, I think, is the ability to not give up and shamelessness. I think these are very important things. People are going to ask you to bugger off, but you don't bugger off. That's the thing. You keep at it as long as it takes. You keep asking questions. That's one thing that's very important.
For me, I think the first time that I saw proofreading marks was when I was doing my internship at Zuban.
Oh wow!
At Zuban
You work at
Books.
Zuban?
Yeah,
Lovely. I love their
and
office. I'm
I know it's
totally
the prettiest office ever.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
honestly, as someone who is from the English literature background, still when you do an internship, you know nothing about publishing. Like when you enter that world, you realize that you are not prepared for it at all, and like a literature degree doesn't mean anything. Like you're equally clueless when it comes to publishing. So a lot of I think knowledge about how everything works is very much learned, and it's very much sort of on the job.
Absolutely.
And it's not something that you can really study. So what makes a good story for you?
This is again a personal opinion. As long as it doesn't bore me, whether it's cinema, whether it's music, whether it's painting, it should engage. It should try to engage with me. It shouldn't alienate me by trying to. No writer should try to be better than their reader.
As someone who also loves literary fiction a lot, I think that's something with literary fiction as well, where just because it's literary again doesn't mean that it needs to have complicated language. It can be sort of very like easy to read, very simple language, easy to understand, and still be extremely complex and deal with sort of complex themes and be sort of this thing that you have to unpack. You receive so many submissions, and I know that when people send in manuscripts, it's not just the manuscript, right? Like they write sort of a book proposal, which sort of tells you what the story is about, who the author is. So what works or doesn't work for you in that proposal? Like what makes you feel like, okay, this is a good pitch and I want to read this book?
Create a mystery out of what you're writing. Why you chose to write this, and why you are right for this, and what the material is about, and keep it a page long. That's enough. If you can't, I mean, often in the West they say that you need to have that elevator pitch for your book. You need to be able to describe your book in a sense. It's tough. I understand. It's not easy to describe something I've written 50,000, 60,000 words in a sentence. I mean, it's great if you can build a pitch out of it. Treat me as a reader. Don't treat me as an editor when you're sending me a manuscript or sending me a submission or a proposal, whatever.
Yeah. Don't treat me as a friend who you're sort of just telling
of course
the
not. I'm not your
story
friend.
to.
Friends are going to buy your book even if it's the shittiest book in the world. Why would you want to pitch it to a friend? Pitch it to someone who won't buy it.
Yeah. And
it's
I think
the sell me this pen trick in the interviews thing, right? We used to have those interviews. Sell me this pen right now. Sell me this cup of coffee or whatever.
No, exactly, because we had to do these sort of elevator pitches when I was doing my publishing course, because we had to do this thing of, okay, pitch 5 book ideas to me. And, each, like pitch a book idea in 30 seconds, pitch a book idea in 1 minute. And in that 1 minute, you have to sort of not just tell you, okay, this is what the book is about, but also like why it would work, or why it would work with a certain kind of audience. And I feel like those kind of things are always fun to do.
I remember at Jaipur a couple of years back, I met Andrew Sean Greer, who won the Pulitzer for his novel called Less, and we had a lovely chat, and and I asked him what worked for your book because uh, a, a, he, according to him, large part of the Western publishing circle wasn't very happy about the decision because this was the first time a comedy was winning the Pulitzer.
Right.
Comedy can win lesser awards, but Pulitzer they consider serious highbrow fiction, right?
Yeah.
It was a romantic comedy coming, uh, and he said he had no idea. He was just writing his own life. I mean, he was taking elements from his own life, and he was just writing a book because he had to write a book. And the ironic thing, I asked him this. The ironic thing is the book that he wrote. You must pick that book up if you haven't read it. It's called
I
Less.
haven't yet.
Yeah. So it's about he's a 50-year-old gay writer. The book is about a 50-year-old gay writer. And in the book, the writer is mocked at some point. I don't exactly remember because it was 2.5 years ago, but at some point, someone makes fun of him that, do you think you're going to win the Pulitzer for writing this book? And he won the Pulitzer for that book. So you cannot, this is not a science that you can crack. It's not a code you can crack. Uh, but yeah, you cannot disengage as well. It's impossible. You don't know sometimes. Mostly, you don't know what you've written. You just have to try and when I'm writing blurbs for books that I publish, more often than not, I have to tell the writer sometimes that what this book is about because they have written it.
Yeah.
They've done hard work, but it's impossible to move away and look at it from an aerial point of view, which an editor has to do.
Yeah. And I think as an editor, you're also able to sort of pinpoint what the most exciting or most interesting elements or the most unique elements of that book are, right? Which would make it interesting
Absolutely,
to readers,
absolutely. We have to
which sort of
create.
separates it from all the other
Yeah,
books in that
yeah.
genre, for
Yeah,
instance.
sometimes you have to structurally edit the book in a manner, especially with nonfiction. You have to do it where you have something interesting going on, even if that breaks the chronology of the narrative. You have
Yes.
something interesting going on right at the beginning, because if you haven't grabbed my attention uh, in the first few pages, uh, I don't think I would invest in that book. You have to. I'm not saying it has to be earth shattering, but you have to give me something in the first few pages so that I want to know what happens next. So it is impossible for any narrative to be at a peak constantly uh, throughout its duration. But it's important to start at a place. I'm not saying you have to start at a peak. It doesn't have to be, the murder doesn't have to happen on the first page, but it has to have something in the first few pages which
Yeah.
ensures that a reader who read those first few pages is invested in it already. There has to be some amount of investment from the reader's perspective. How you do
Yeah.
it, that's a writer's job and an editor's job as well. How you maneuver it, but the material has to be produced by the writer. Uh,
But to be honest, I do love when the murder begins on the first page.
I'd love it too. I'd love it. One of my favorite novels, most disturbing thing I've read is Lullaby by um, uh, fairly recent. She won the Grand Prix prize in France. Was Leila Slimani. And in the first page of the
Okay.
book, a nanny murders two babies.
Oh,
The
wow.
babies she's supposed to look after, little babies, not even grown-ups. One is some 3-year-old. The other one is 1-year-old or something. She
Yeah.
murders them.
That's
What
shocking.
the hell just happened?
Yeah,
And you can't then not read that book, right?
definitely. No, but I agree with. I'm loving all the book recommendations, by the way. I mean, this is this is gonna be everything. I'm making a list here for myself for 2021. The books that I need to read. I interned at Simon and Schuster Canada.
Oh wow. You're part of the
This
family
is
now. It's just
exactly. So
okay.
I did this in
Yeah.
2019, so
Right.
just before the pandemic, and
Yeah.
when I was doing that, so I was lot of what I did was I was working with sort of the senior nonfiction editor,
Right.
Justin
Right.
Stoller, and he would get a lot of these pitches from um, agents, which are just sort of which wouldn't have the entire nonfiction book, but would have the structure and would
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
sort of and like a couple of chapters and most of sort of how the book was going to be structured, how an
The
argument was
breakdown,
going to be
yeah,
made, because it's
yeah,
nonfiction, so you need to
yeah,
send that. And
yeah,
I would love spending so much time just sort of moving things around and being like, this, it would work so much better if the structure
yeah,
was like this, or if
yeah,
things were moved around like this. So I
yeah,
find, even in sort of the world of editing, I find
yeah.
structural editing really, really fun.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite thing about being a commissioning editor?
I mean, it's again a cliched response because it's
Is it reading?
the sorry, it is because the fact that so many people are trusting you with their manuscript, their material. It's a huge privilege, but at a personal capacity, you're also exposed to just so much that you otherwise wouldn't be as a general reader. You
Yes.
Some of the books that I have, some of the manuscripts that I may have read in the past, which have interested me, may not even have become books later on.
So, but I wanted to ask you about the pandemic, and I was reading, I think one of your scroll articles where you said that uh, getting up was like getting up in the morning and becoming a giant dung beetle, like Kafka's
Yeah.
Metamorphosis. So,
Yes. Yes.
which I love that, by the way. Just, I mean, I agree with that completely. But
Yeah.
what has it been like, beyond this at this point, as an editor, as a reader? What has changed?
Uh, not much actually, because now things have started opening up again. Yes, last year when the lockdown happened and the first couple of months everything was shut, it was tricky because nobody had any idea what's going to happen. Nobody, all of us in the industry, not just within the organization, but even our other editors that we are friends with or acquainted with, we were asking each
Yeah.
other like, what is the future of this? And nobody had an idea. But I've written again in that, I think in that same scroll article, when you look at the history of things that have happened, when you look at the world wars, when you look at other epidemics which have happened in the world, uh, they haven't really shut down the industry. They haven't. Yes, there has been a temporary, like you were saying, internet lag, that kind of a thing. It's not in sync, the number of books that we're trying to produce and the number of readers that are out there.
Yeah.
But when I live in South Delhi, and there is a bookstore right near my house, and a very old bookstore called Midland. When I went there right after the lockdown was lifted, I went there and I asked them. They had just opened doors, and they were delivering books to readers at their homes in Delhi and across the country, I believe. So they said that the moment we opened doors, there were a bunch of phone calls which started coming in. They were promoting a little bit on their Instagram, but that was enough. They said that
Yeah.
sales is not the same, but did I expect this to happen so soon? No. So people won't stop reading because of a pandemic. The distribution network suffered. We were not able to put the books out as we wanted to. We were not able to publish the books that we had to, shuffle the list around a little bit because the kind of books, some of the ideas that I keep saying this, I've said this a couple of times before, but you have to also understand the kind of books that you're publishing. If I published a travel book in the middle of 2020, that would be suicidal. So you have to understand
Yeah.
what material is going to go out there. I was mostly looking for more hopeful material because I have read so many pandemic submissions even before the pandemic is over about how the pandemic affected the world 20 years from now and things like those. So will it reshape the industry? No, it won't. I don't think anything can. Bookstores did suffer. I heard of some bookstores shutting down, including a very big and old bookstore in Bombay called Wayward and Wise, which was
Yeah.
terrible that it shut down. But those are setbacks that you have to take in your account and then move ahead, because that's going to happen. That's going to happen with every industry. We can see in the cinema industry how it has affected the theaters, who are constantly.
Yeah.
I get messages every day as to how first, earlier in 2020, mid 2020, I was getting messages as to how when the theaters open, you can book a seat which is safe. Now I get messages from PVR. You won't believe it. How to book the entire theater? Pay 50 lakhs and book the entire theater. So they're really upping their game, but every industry has suffered as a result. But eventually things will fall into place.
So, what kind of books do you think we will see more of in, say, 2021 or in the next sort of 5
A
years?
lot of pandemic books, pandemic romances, I think are going to. are going to storm the market. There's nothing wrong with it. As long as there's something, as long as it's interesting, like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. I am not going to publish, like I said, I have 20 books to publish in a year. I'm not going to publish like a bunch of pandemic romance. It has to be interesting. It has to be something new. But I hope people write about, uh, I think what's necessary right now is also, as much as it's necessary to document this tremendous year that we've all had. And none of us, even my parents' generation, they haven't seen something like this in their own life. So it's important to document that from various perspectives, both in the fiction and non-fiction space. But I also think a bit of nostalgia won't be bad right now, to look back at what used to be, what we still could have. Of course, there's a huge influx of writing about how the future is going to look. With up until now, it was a future with AI and androids and technology taking over. Now it's another element added to it, the pandemic and other such things, and biological diversions that the world will have to go through. But I think looking back won't be a bad idea right now, especially in fiction. The kind of world that we lived in, to remember, more importantly than anything else, that
what a pre-pandemic world felt like.
Yes, and that we can that we have to rebuild it. Just because we have faced a storm, but our ship capsized. But do we drown, or do we rebuild the ship? That's the important thing. I mean, I'm as a person, I'm a pessimist. There is no denying it. So if you ask me as a person, I would say the most hopeless things that can ever be. My mother often hangs up on me because I say hopeless things about the future. But as a reader and as an editor, I would want to see more hopeful things, because the world needs it. The world needs a little bit of optimism right now.
Where do you see publishing headed in the next 5 years? And I also mean in terms of, Simon & Schuster India, because now there's this merger. Already there are like only 4-5 big publishing multinational companies, and now Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster are merging. So I don't know. What does the future look like?
Penguin House, that's in, No, as far as the merger is concerned, I really have no idea. I don't think there has been too much information about it yet. I mean, like everyone else, we know that the sale has happened. I know a little more than that, but I'm not allowed to share it. But as far as publishing is concerned, I know what you mean. It's a few large houses, and it's is it ideal? Perhaps not. There should be more players. There should be more. But I think the independent publishing houses are coming up, are doing better work rather. And I'm working here today, so I can only talk about where I am as a part of a larger publishing house or a larger conglomerate. What we should be doing is encouraging independent publishing houses to produce better, to not cut into their space, to help bookstores to interact with and help bookstores as much more than we are doing. Like we at Simon & Schuster last year, we took a decision, and you of course know of Yoda Press, which does some exquisite work, an independent publishing house in Delhi. So we have now started an imprint, which is a combination of both. We've launched our first book. It's a translation of a novel by Shivani, the great writer who's no more. It's the first time a book of hers has been translated into English, and we publish it together. So can we publish a book better than an independent publishing house? Certainly not. I don't think so. Most independent publishing houses, like Yoda itself, are capable of doing that themselves. The distribution network is where bigger publishing houses come in. So does it help the book in a way that it reaches out to more people? Certainly it does. But 5 years from now, I have no idea. I hope publishing is alive, and and it will be.
Oh, publishing is
will.
alive. That
It
doesn't
certainly will be.
sound.
No, I'm kidding. It certainly will be. I hope more smaller publishers come up. That's a hope I have. More independent writing comes up, and it's part of the mainstream market, because, like I said, a large number of times, uh, what smaller publishing houses or independent houses publish, it's not even visible. There is no visibility. They're not available
Yeah.
in the bookstores, or you don't see them on the internet. That's where some of the might can go into. I don't know how exactly you do it, but like I said, this association with Yoda Press is a step forward, I feel. We hope to continue. We have some very exciting books lined up in the next 1 year that we are going to be publishing with them. Um, uh, so I hope this is a pattern that is followed in the future as well, where it's ultimately an industry. It has to survive on its whole. It can't survive independently, like we editors can't survive independently. A large publishing house on its own can't survive independently. It has to work together. It's a team. It's like cricket.
Yeah.
You can't have one player scoring 100 and then everyone else scoring 0 and expecting you to win the match.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's really great. Okay, so I have sort of a very, very short rapid fire round. What genres other than literary fiction do you like to read for pleasure?
Crime, history, but non-fiction, narrative history. That's also a fairly recent phenomenon over the past maybe 5 years. True crime. I enjoy true crime.
Oh, nice. I enjoy true crime. I mean, I haven't tried reading true crime books, but I enjoy watching true crime shows.
I'm totally addicted to it. I think Netflix, I have the account because every week they have a show on a serial killer who existed, and I'm all hooked.
Yeah. Okay. A book that you wish you had commissioned.
The Manu Pillai's a book called The Ivory Throne, which is I think a terrific. I mean, Manu is a terrific writer, but that's a book I wish I had found.
Okay. If not publishing, what career would you choose?
No other career would choose me, so it's not a choice. If not publishing, I would be broke. That'll be my career. I came to publishing because I was bad at everything else. It's the truth.
Okay. That's fair. I think on that note, on that very positive and optimistic note, I think we can end the interview. So thank you so much, Sayantan, for coming here and talking to me about books and publishing and everything that you've done so far.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
So that was Sayantan Ghosh talking about how commissioning is this active process where you constantly look for new ideas and interesting people. He also says that publishing is like cricket, an analogy which is completely foreign to me, but it makes sense because you really have to work as a team and come together to get a book published. So this series is brought to you by Bound, a storytelling company that helps you tell your stories. You can find us at Bound India on social media, and you should definitely check out the video version of this series on our YouTube channel, which is again at Bound India. If you want more detailed insights and predictions about the publishing industry, download our free research document, which is extremely comprehensive about the publishing industry. It's called Demystifying Indian Publishing, and the link for that is in the description below. Thank you for tuning in to The Book People. I'm Aishwarya, and I'll be back next week with another guest and a new question to discuss. Until then, keep reading.